everybody. It is Thursday night. Normally on Thursday night, you come on my channel, you see the Hammer and Nail show, but that's been preempted a little bit recently. And so tonight, instead, we're going to have some fun. We've been doing this over the last few weeks, doing 49ers fan roundtables. And so we're going to get that done, keep that rolling tonight. I'm Jack Hammer with the Santa Rosa Press Democrat. And with me tonight, I have Peter Lucas. How you doing, Peter?
Hey, I'm happy to be here, Jack.
It's great to have you on. And then also Niner Nick. Everybody knows Niner Nick Newman. He's the he comes on after the games and lets everybody know what happened. He gets fired up. So it's going to be a fun show. We have some good stuff happening with the 49ers, in terms of content for us to talk about. So we're definitely going to hit on that. And real quick, before we start, we have Bryant Culp, who's a member of the Toolbox, and he says, Jack, what's up? What's up, Bryant? Good to have you on board. Hope you enjoyed the show. Should be a fun one. So this happened today, right? It's always fun. There's always something going on around the 49ers this offseason, and especially with Trey Lance. And so today we had Colin Cowherd and Mike Silver do a podcast and talking about the 49ers doubting Trey Lance. Do you guys buy this or sell this? And we'll start with Nick. Go ahead.
I doubt that the 49ers are doubting Trey Lance himself, but I'm not doubting that Silver had some good points about maybe their reluctancy to commit full on to Trey Lance because they have experienced so much success with Jimmy Garoppolo. So I do think there might be some truth there that little bit of Garoppolo did but was a part of our 2 championship and 1 Super Bowl appearance over the last 3 years. And anytime you're in a position like that where you have a complete unknown player like Trey Lance, and in my opinion, Trey Lance still falls in that unknown category. So I don't think the 49ers doubt Trey Lance, the human being, the athlete, the quarterback, but the situation they've gotten themselves into where they do have a quarterback that can facilitate their offense so well and they've had so much success with. I do think there might be some reserves there, and there's some truth behind, do we really want to commit to Trey Lance right now while the Super Bowl window is wide open? We were just in the NFC Championship game last year, and that was one of the angles that Cowherd and Silver were taking, and I think it's naive to say, no, that's absolutely not the case. The 49ers are just ready to rip off the Band-Aid with Jimmy Garoppolo, because if that were the case, he would be gone by now. Maybe they would have eaten that money that they wouldn't have, or they would have got it like they're doing right now, waiting for him to pass his physical and cut him post-June 1st and clear that $24 million. Maybe they would have been more willing to cut him with the injury designation and not get as much back if they were ready to rip that Band-Aid off. But I do think part of them aren't quite ready and confident in that just yet.
What do you think, Peter?
So I'm going to disagree just a little bit. Like, I look at this, I am going to sell this just because I look at this as another off-season news cycle story by the national media that's kind of just grasping for straws at this point. I think that it's a foregone conclusion that Jimmy Garoppolo, I don't believe he'll be here week 1. I don't know when he's gone or if they can trade him, if they can release him, but I don't think that they're holding on to him. Kyle Shanahan has been talking about him in the past tense all off season. And I just don't think that. I think that they're definitely moving on to Trey Lance. I think that Trey Lance has shown them enough in practice, just by the way in practice and in the couple of games that he played last year, the talent level, just the physical talent alone, the things that he can do that Jimmy just can't. Now, what we are looking to see is can Lance do the things that Jimmy was good at, which is those short passes across the middle, those just the easy throws that he would kind of throw bullets through guys. So we're really kind of looking to see if he can do that. But I think that he's had this whole off season, the whole mini camp, the whole OTAs, and then he's going to have a whole training camp to really figure a majority of that stuff out. But I don't think that at this point that I think it's a foregone conclusion. I'll just say that.
Okay. Yeah. And I'm going to, as far as my take on this, I'm going to sell this as well. And the reason I'm selling it, I don't believe that there's any credence to the 49ers doubting Trey Lance. They've actually come out and said the opposite. They've told you that they were willing to move Jimmy Garoppolo. They told you that at the owners' meeting. They've told you that what's holding them back is the shoulder injury. and that killed the trade things, and then also they're not going to release them and take a $7.5 million cap hit when they can just go ahead and hold on to it. So I'm selling that any of this is relating to the 49ers doubting Trey Lance. I think they're all in on Trey Lance. I think they really like what's going forward. Now, do they have some concerns, or maybe they're like a little bit reservations or trepidation is, it's going to be different. Are we going to be able to, it's not going to be, he's not the same as Jimmy Garoppolo. He's not going to get the ball out of his hands just as quick, and those types of things. It puts more pressure on Kyle Shanahan as a play caller in some ways to be able to work around it. But I think that they're all in on it, and I think that they like what they're doing here.
Yeah, for sure. Can I say one more little thing about the reason why, just because of just going off of what you just said? I mean, the amount of time I think that between Lance and Garoppolo was like 0.3 seconds in getting the ball out. So, I mean, is he going to really have to redo the offense? I don't think. I think it's more just he's going to have to think more about playing to Lance's strengths, if anything. Like of throwing the ball downfield, I think we're going to see some more shot plays than we normally would.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I thought was missing in that conversation. It was so hyper focused on, is Trey Lance going to be able to do every single thing that Jimmy Garoppolo can do and has shown his ability to do, without considering, but what is Trey Lance going to do better than Jimmy Garoppolo, and how is he going to take the 49ers offense that step further? And that was one of my biggest issues with that conversation, is that they didn't dive into that. The reason why they drafted Trey Lance to begin with is because he has a greater big play ability, has a stronger arm, is mobile. There's going to be more big plays that come along with Trey Lance. And that trade-off might even be worth it if he can't do every single thing that Garoppolo did well, 15 yards and under. And that whole component of that conversation was missing, which to me came off a little one-sided. And I wish that they were just kind of touched on all the great things that Lance can bring to the table as well.
Yeah, and it's perfect that you brought that up, because that was one of the points that I wanted to make. We're going to kind of stick on this topic. I know we're going to talk about some different areas of this. And one of the things for me, and Nick, you just kind of hit on it, was they were and Silver mentioned it on Twitter afterwards. He mentioned it, I know, in the show as well. He said that Jimmy G is elite in terms of arm talent and accuracy, and specifically the willingness to hang in there and throw it in tight spots and the ability to do so accurately. And I agree with that statement. I do believe if you're talking about 15 yards and in, that's a true statement, because Garoppolo is as good as anybody in the league with fitting the ball in, as long as it's 15 yards and in. You start getting beyond 15, and it starts to get really dicey, right? So for me, I mean, do you, and I guess Peter, maybe you as well, do you guys buy that Lance is not Lance, excuse me, but Garoppolo is really good at, as long as you keep it 15 yards or under? Do you guys kind of buy it, or do you believe that what he said there is accurate?
So, like when you say elite arm talent, I'm not immediately thinking 15 yards and in. Like I'm not thinking, I'm not thinking that. I'm thinking a guy that can hit that back shoulder throw on the boundary. I'm thinking a guy that can put the ball exactly where his guys to keep his guys away from harm. That's not Jimmy G, in my opinion. Like Jimmy is, you're absolutely right that he is 15 yards and in. He does a great job of getting the ball out quickly, but I think that he's so hyper-focused. When I watch him play, he's so hyper-focused on getting the ball out so quick that he throws the ball in harm's way because he's just trying to get rid of the ball. I feel like he's afraid to move around in the pocket. He's kind of like just a statue back there, and he's like, he's not going to make any kind of plays with his leg. We already know he's not going to make any plays with his legs, but he fails to even kind of manipulate the pocket to get away from pressure. So I think he has to get the ball out super quick. And I think it's when we say elite arm talent, I think that he's just really good at getting the ball at those little short intermediate throws underneath across the middle. They have to be across the middle because they cannot be out to the boundary. So that's what he's good at. And that's what I'm interested to see if Trey Lance can do without throwing the ball through the guy's chest.
And to follow up on that point, that's what struck me too. You can't manipulate the word elite, the phrase or term, whatever you want to refer to it as, elite arm talent, and then only mean by it he does a good job of getting the ball within the hashes, 15 yards and under. You know what I mean? That's like pure manipulation to fit your own agenda. Jimmy G is great at doing this, making him elite arm talent wise. When I think of arm talent, I think of Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Josh Allen, those guys, Aaron Rodgers, guys that can thread the needle in all three levels of the football field. That's not Jimmy Garoppolo. He doesn't have elite arm talent. Can he throw with anticipation? Yes, at times. Can he throw really accurately 15 yards and in to an extent when it's inside, like you said, not towards the boundaries, but yes, of course, he's great at that. That's why the 49ers have had such a tremendous amount of success with Jimmy Garoppolo. But to say he has elite arm talent, you lost me right there. I'm sorry. It's like you're just trying to fit your own agenda at this point to really pump him up in whatever you're trying to do with that.
Yeah, and as far as the 15 yards and in, that was my own thing. He didn't mention that. He just said elite arm talent.
Yeah.
Here's the one thing I will say in terms of, I know when we talk about arm talent, we usually think of the arm strength or those kinds of things. I think the way that I would perceive, without talking to Mike Silver and asking him a follow-up question on this, would be, I think that what he's talking about there is that ability to get the ball out quick, and that, you know, how he has that, because Garoppolo can get the ball out of his hand without having to really even use his lower half. That's part of why he stinks so bad at throwing the ball down the field, because he doesn't really use his legs. He doesn't really drive to make the throws very often. And so it's that quick twitch to get it out with the guy right in your face. I think that's the only thing that would be close to elite about Garoppolo's arm, because he doesn't have the arm talent. The arm talent isn't there in terms of what we normally would think of as elite arm talent.
But do you think, Jack, do you think that the reason why he does that is because he's afraid, this guy's been injured like almost every season he's been with us, right? So do you think his injuries are kind of a little bit in his head a little bit, and that he doesn't want to even get touched on the rush, so he needs to get that ball out as quickly as possible? Not saying that he's scared of getting hit, but he doesn't want to have to like bob and weave or move around in the pocket. I think that, like you said, he doesn't use his lower half. It's almost like he forgets that his feet are even there. Like it's really weird the way he keeps this really super wide base, and like there's no foot movement. He just stands there, and in 2 seconds that ball is out, come hell or high water.
I will say that what I think is he stands in there and he'll get hit. So I don't think he's afraid to get hit. I think if we went back and watched him in 2017 and even 2018, we saw like a lot of those same things even then, as far as, you know, that getting the ball out quick and that type of thing. Even in 2017, some of the games that they won, you look at some of the plays that he made, and they were weird plays, like just kind of throwing the ball up in the air and kind of into a space, and all of a sudden, you know, the receiver comes out of nowhere and was able to catch it when it looks like it's going to be a pick. I mean, that happened against the Titans, Tennessee.
2017 game.
Yeah, so he got a few lucky breaks in 2017. So that's stuff that he went all along. And then once he tore his ACL, he didn't have he doesn't have that movement ability anymore. So he doesn't bounce around the pocket. So I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag on both of those. Real quick before we go on with this topic, I wanted to. Dabadoo says, or Dabada, thank you for the donation, says they're just shooting blanks unlike Jack Hammer. Well, I mean, yes, I think right now, and let's get into that, because there's some things that they said that I just don't buy. I don't know if I would even say that that they don't buy. I would say there are things that they're bringing up that have already been addressed by Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers. Number one, Silver talks about the Trey Lance package and the fact that they wanted to do it, but they didn't. Do you guys remember why the 49ers stopped using the Trey Lance package? Do you guys remember
He said Kyle said himself that it was kind of messing with his play calling flow.
Yep.
And like so he wanted to kind of take that out of it, because it was messing with the flow of the game. And you could tell the difference when Trey was in there, that if he had to get out of the pocket, the offensive line kind of struggled kind of keeping up with and getting holding penalties when he would be in the game sometimes. So I think that was the flow of the game, also the also the offensive line was struggling with the continuity of having Trey and then having Jimmy. So I think they just scrapped it, in my opinion.
And to follow up on that point, if you remember the Week 1 Lions game, Jimmy Garoppolo leads the offense down the field, and then here comes Trey Lance out of nowhere inside the red zone. And granted, it was successfully through a touchdown pass to Trent Sherfield. I think that was the first touchdown of the year. But when you watch the flow of that, and as someone that's watched football their whole life, you just had one quarterback lead you down 60, 70 yards, and now here comes the other one. It was just so choppy, and it was so weird. The one time that it really made a lot of sense to go with Trey Lance in a package was the touchdown to close out the first half in the Packers game, Week 3, Sunday Night Football, where they couldn't get anything going offensively. And I think it was the last play before halftime. Like, they could have opted to take the field goal, get the points. There was only 2-3 seconds left. Like, this was the final play. They decided to go for it. They brought Lance in to have that dual threat ability, and he ran it in for a touchdown. Like, that was the one time where it was, okay, this makes a lot of sense. But outside of that, early on in the season, even in the Raiders game, it was like, what the hell am I watching? The Raiders preseason game. So, of course, it made sense that they scrapped that midseason. I thought that was ridiculous to be brought up. And then they brought up Lance's arm fatigue again. They have the audacity to do that and to say that he has to take days off after throwing because his arm can't handle it.
He's 22 years old.
Well, okay. No, the arm fatigue is one that it's an interesting one because I don't know if you guys heard this on KMBR, but they actually interviewed Adam, I think it's Dato, the guy from 3DB, 3DQB, who worked with Trey Lance. They interviewed him at the beginning of May. I did a show with Rob Shue on his channel last week. We went over it, and he actually talked about the need to, in working with Trey, to help him maintain his arm so that it's full strength throughout the season. And I think when we hear this arm fatigue stuff, some of it is if you're changing your motion around, it's like anything else. You start to change it, you're going to deal with some things that way. And the other part, and I'd be interested to hear this from the coaches themselves, from Kyle Shanahan. Maybe we'll get a chance to ask him that once training camp comes about. But, when they talk about arm fatigue, is it just arm soreness? Because I can understand a quarterback who's dealing with arm soreness in training camp, because just from going through it myself a long time ago, every year I would struggle with basically I felt like tendonitis in my right elbow during the beginning of practices. So I can imagine what it's like for these guys. So is it that, or is it just throughout the season all of a sudden he just gets a dead arm?
Yeah, so that's what I'm kind of curious about too, Jack, because when you hear arm fatigue, like that's what you just talked about, sounds like a very common, or what should be a common experience for quarterbacks or anybody just doing a consistent throwing motion day in and day out. Like, you would expect your body to kind of feel sore from time to time, just as a natural reflex and instinct and reaction to throwing a football or whatever you're throwing time and time again. But to phrase it as arm fatigue and make it sound like it's such a far off where none of these other quarterbacks have to do, because when else have you heard the word arm fatigue applied to a quarterback of this, like a big name quarterback, which I consider Trey Lance because he was a 3rd overall pick, even though talent wise or as far as proving himself, he might not be there yet, but he was a huge investment. He was a 3rd overall pick. When's the last time you've heard the word arm fatigue associated with a big name quarterback? And they make it sound like it's not just, he's just getting his, I don't know.
But this was the first time I had actually heard the term arm fatigue.
Right.
But I remember when Kaepernick was our quarterback, they talked about a couple of times him having dead arm, and I think that was when he was coming back from injury. But it was almost like they made up the term just so they would have something to talk about on Trey Lance. That's the way it felt to me. It was like we really don't have anything to say about this kid. Like, nothing is coming out of the front office except that they like what he sees. We've got to come up with something to talk about. So we're gonna make it the arm fatigue. Arm fatigue sounds good, because he's young and he's probably practicing all the time, and he's probably somebody said he's tired. So
and to piggyback off of that, I almost take it as like it's a jab at Trey Lance, because in 2020 when Jerick McKinnon was on the team, he sat out one day of practice and he was listed on the injury report for having tired legs. So I took it and ran with it. Here's tired legs, McKinnon. Of course you have tired legs. You're a football player. I'm sure every football player goes through phases where they have tired legs. But it was literally listed on the injury report as tired legs. So here's Trey Lance with his arm fatigue. Like, I'm sure he gets arm fatigue like every other quarterback. Like, why do you got to label it like that, though?
Yeah,
But,
that's crazy.
you know?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting topic that people keep coming up. I don't really think it's a whole lot. I don't make a whole lot out of it, but you know, it seems to get traction right now. And it started off with some guy out of Philadelphia that I don't think anybody had heard of before that report, and now it's gotten all the way to Colin Cowherd and Mike Silver reporting the same thing. Real quick, we have Philip. I'm going to try to say this one. DeBergeron. He gives a nice little bonus.
DeBergeron. I bet you that's what it is.
DeBergeron. All right. See, that's why I have you guys on here. You guys
you
just sounded out.
That's right. DeBergeron.
I do have one thing to add real quick, because I'm looking at the comment section. This is something that I was thinking about too, because I honestly haven't heard Colin Cowherd talk about Trey Lance too frequently, but Peter Moa brought up that there is a relationship between Trey Lance and Colin Cowherd's girlfriend at a point. And I remember pre-draft, Colin Cowherd was speaking very highly, extremely highly of Trey Lance, and his tone has shifted since then.
Yeah.
Like, just seeing I forget if it was when the 49ers drafted Trey Lance, or was it doing the pre-draft process? I forget when I heard at first Colin, and he acknowledged, like, yeah, this is a man that's been in my house. I've sat down with him. This is a great, and then to see him kind of
jilted his daughter, now it's, but yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, no, that is part of it too, right? Because I remember that too, Nick. That Cowherd was very positive on Lance when he was at that point, and now that he's no longer with his daughter, he is not so high on him anymore. And then the other thing that they said was, you know, the 49ers were at 3-5. They went ahead and stuck with Jimmy Garoppolo instead of moving off of Garoppolo to go with Trey Lance. And I'm going to take this one first, and I'm going to say I think that was something that Shanahan has talked about. The 49ers at that point still had a shot at making the playoffs. At 3-5, as unlikely as it was, Silver talked about how bad that Arizona loss was at Levi's. I agree with him. When I left the press box after that game, I told Grant, who was sitting next to me, I think the 49ers were done. And then we walked down to do our stuff. You know, they proved me wrong. But I think what Shanahan was doing is he looked at it, we're 3-5. I think he even said in his press conference after the game or that week following that he had been in situations similar to that during his time in Washington, and they made it back to the playoffs. And I think that if they had gone out against the Rams and they had lost to the Rams, the switch would have been made, because at 3-6, you're done. But you beat the Rams, you have Jacksonville the next week. Now you're saying, okay, if we can win this week, then we're right back there to get to 500, and then who knows what happens once we get to 500. And so he already explained that as well. And I you know, I don't know why some of these things are continuing to come up, other than the fact that they just feel like people aren't paying attention.
Yeah, it's. I don't know how many different ways they can say the same thing over and over and over again. But Trey, I personally think that the plan was all along to let him sit. And I think the other part of the plan was to build up Jimmy Garoppolo's trade value. I think that was the plan in the beginning. I don't think that they knew what they had in the team in the beginning, because they really didn't get their groove going and really establish their identity till week 9 or 10. So it was almost like Kyle was still tweaking things as he was going throughout every single game in the first half of the season. So I just look at it as it is what I think it was part of the plan to let him sit. And I think that the excuses of the injuries to the finger and all these different things that they were talking about, I think that it just really came down to they were trying to drive Jimmy's value up, because I don't think he had trade value at the time. I think I'm not really a believer in that they had 2 firsts on the table before the season started and all that kind of stuff, or 2 seconds, I'm sorry, on the table before the season started. I'm just not a believer in that. I think that they felt like they had to drive his trade value up.
Now, and one last piece that was put out there was Deebo Samuel and Deebo Samuel's frustration, and Mike Silver opining that it could be due to the fact that he's not going to be utilized the same way with with Trey Lance, or having Trey Lance be his quarterback instead of Jimmy Garoppolo is going to mean that his numbers are going to drop, and so he's not going to be able to get as much money. What do you guys think about that? I'll start with you, Nick.
Mhm.
Oh man, it's a compelling argument. That's what I think. What I think more than anything, this is my take on it, and I felt very similarly about George Kittle when it was time for him to get his contract extension. Deebo Samuel deserves a raise. Why would he step foot on the football field again? Because the way he plays, and football players in general, every time they take a snap, their career could be over just like that. And especially with a guy like Deebo Samuel that's utilized as a battering ram once he gets the ball in his hands. So I think that's it more than anything, that he has shown what he's capable of. He carried the 49ers, literally carried them, the offense specifically from, well, we're talking about finding their identity. The 49ers didn't know who they were until they started using Deebo Samuel consistently as a running back. That completely changed their season, So if I'm Deebo Samuel, I'm not playing either until I get the money that I feel like I deserve. So I think that's where Deebo Samuel is coming from more than anything. But I do think Silver made an interesting point. I know that I'm not going to be featured to the same extent I was this past year with Garoppolo, with Trey Lance. I'm not going to get the balls I'm not going to get the ball in the same ways as frequently with Trey Lance as I was getting them with Jimmy Garoppolo. That might be part of Deebo Samuel's thought process, because I do think Trey Lance is able to share the wealth a little bit more, whereas here's the Jimmy Gimmies. Let me throw the ball at Deebo Samuel 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage, because that's what's working best for our offense right now. I do think that'll change as far as volume and how frequent it happens with Trey Lance. So maybe there's some truth behind that, but more so than anything, I think Deebo Samuel doesn't want to risk his body not getting his first massive contract, because in the NFL, it just takes that one play to lose it all.
What do you think, Peter?
So with, I think that we all can agree that this offense is, while it's probably going to look similar to last year, I think with the running and how much Lance actually gets to throw, I think that Deebo absolutely has reservations as to how he's going to be used, and that absolutely, like Nick said, he shouldn't step. I was shocked that he was at minicamp. Like I wouldn't have, even if I was him, I don't know that I would have been there. Like that. I mean, I know that he would have had to pay them $90,000, but I was surprised he got on the field and did any kind of drills. I wasn't surprised that he was there, because of course he would have had to pay. But the reality is he deserves that. Like you just said, Nate, he deserves every dollar that he gets, that he's going to get. And I think that they are really kind of stuck on that, on the guaranteed money aspect of it. But yeah, he's not going to have the same production that he had last season, because he's not going to have the same amount of carries. He's going to, I think his touchdowns might go up, because I think that he got a majority of his touchdowns from Trey Lance, and Trey Lance only played 2.5 games. So I think that his touchdowns may go up, but I think his yardage may not be the same. And I think that they're going to spread the ball around. They have dynamic weapons now. They have like complete receiver room in my opinion. So I think that because of that, it's going to look a little different, and it might hit Deebo's production.
And just one more thing to add, Jack, real quick. Sorry to interrupt and interject myself here, but I just pulled up Deebo Samuel's contract history. The amount he's earned to date is only $6 million. Not only, but in football terms, only $6 million for a player of his caliber. And you take into consideration he plays in the state of California. So that $6 million is really what, 3.5, 4 million that he's made throughout his career. Why would he step on the field? Think of all the NFL teams that would line up out the door right now and give him $25 million. Mm-hmm. Any team that's capable of giving him $25 million is giving him $25 million.
Yeah.
So that's why I've always thought he's had more leverage. I know people don't think he has any leverage because he has to pay if he sits out, but he would make his money back so quickly, in my opinion, if he were to do that once he goes through the ringer of being a restricted free agent or whatever the technicalities are behind that. But he hasn't made a lot of money. So it makes no sense to me as to why he would step on the football field again without that new contract.
Yeah, it is an interesting one. You guys both made really good points and on both sides of it, and it's a tough one to buy or sell. It's my show, so I'll rent it, okay? But what I'm gonna say is I think you're right. I think that Deebo's numbers are going to go down slightly, because I think the ball's going to get spread around a little bit more. if you look at his numbers last year, he was blowing it out over the first half of the season, and that was because and then at the halfway point when they were 3-5, they said, we need to fix this, and they understood that they just needed to start running the ball more. They needed to stop making the mistakes that they were making offensively, and they started using him as a running back, and his targets sunk. He had like 81 targets in the first 8 games of the season, and they were way lower than that in the second because they were trying to minimize his touches, or manage his touches, I should say. I think he's still going to put up good numbers. You're right; he put up really good numbers playing with Trey Lance last year. Big numbers. I think most of his touchdowns came with Trey Lance, and most of his big plays came with Trey Lance as well. Even though he did have a big one with Garoppolo against the Lions and in Chicago as well. But yeah, his numbers really came when he was playing with Lance, and I think you start to take advantage of some of these deeper routes, and instead of him having to run through defenders all the time like he was doing this year, he's going to be able to maybe play a little bit more free and get the ball downfield a little bit more. But I also do believe that you're going to see Brandon Aiyuk take away some of that because of his deep play ability and deep balls that Aiyuk wasn't getting last year. He's going to get, which is going to take some targets away from other people.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with you. On that part, I think Aiyuk has a chance to really blow it wide open. As far as his stats go. But I think he's going to get a lot of yards. I'm not sure that Aiyuk is going to get a lot of touchdowns. And I know we're going to talk about them being them as a duo later, but it's I really want to see what it's going to look like because they have so many weapons. I'm looking at this wide receiver room, and it's almost confusing to try and figure out what its actual game plan is going to look like.
Okay, yeah, and let's jump into not the receivers, but let's get to the quarterback. I want to get to Garoppolo a little bit here from the standpoint of buy or sell. Should the 49ers pay part of Garoppolo's salary to get a trade done? Now, I know this is a sore subject with a lot of 49er fans, especially coming off of the deal that went down where Baker Mayfield was shipped off to Carolina. David Lombardi had put out a tweet yesterday saying, if you look at Baker Mayfield's contract and the proportions of which were being paid by one team or the other, using those same percentages, 56% of it's being paid by the Browns, 26% by the Panthers, and Mayfield took an 18% pay cut. If the 49ers did that same deal to get a trade done with Jimmy Garoppolo, they would eat $13.6 million of that. Now, there's a big difference between Jimmy Garoppolo and the contract, and his contract situation and the contract situation with Baker Mayfield. But do you guys, buy or sell that the 49ers? I'll start with you, Peter. Should the 49ers pay part of Garoppolo's salary to get a trade done?
I'm selling this. I'm buying a U-Haul for it, and I'm shipping it to somewhere else other than Santa Clara. It is. I want it as far away from this team as possible. I just think that it makes absolutely no sense when you think of that they could just drop him and clear up all that, keep all that money, roll it over to next season's cap, and add some really elite pieces. I just think that to eat that money would scream failure in John Lynch's eyes, and I don't think that he wants to. I just don't think that he wants to do it. I just can't. I honestly can't see them doing that. I think that they're going to end up having to release him, but I don't think that they're going to want to eat any of the money.
What do you think, Nick? I know where you're going with this one already.
No, it's crazy that this is even a conversation.
Yes.
It is. It's that dumb. It's that stupid. Baker Mayfield got a 2024 fifth round pick, correct?
Yes.
It's a 2024 fifth round pick that could become a fourth if you play 70% of the snaps.
I don't even care if it could become a fourth round. That is assuming if that's what they get in return for Garoppolo, and to eat $13 million when you can cut him for free basically and keep all of that money. It's an absolute no-brainer. It's just it's a nice conversation point. And I had someone respond because I quote tweeted Lombardi on that, and I was like, I would never in a million years do this, and here's why. I laid out my reasons. And someone goes, I hate your mentality. Look at all the 5th round success the 49ers have had in the draft, which is true. George Kittle, I'd give $13 million to, but then they named off like DJ Jones and DJ Reed and like all these other, like who's giving $13 million of those guys? Like, I'll take that money. I'll worry about the draft later on.
Yeah.
And like you're talking about, Lucas, I'll use that money not just to re-up myself in free agency, but also pay the Nick Bosas and Deebo Samuels of the world. It's such a stupid hypothetical. That should never, ever happen.
And real quick, like about that also, the Niners already have like, what is it, 11 picks in this next year's draft? Like, so really, what we need another 5th rounder? Do we need another one? I don't think that we do.
Yeah, well, here, okay. So let me get into this a little bit too. The reason that the as crazy as it is when you even look at the Baker Mayfield deal, that was a different situation because they were
Totally.
they were on the hook for it. It didn't matter what they did. Either they were going to pay him $18 million or they were going to pay only a portion of it and save some money. 49ers aren't in that situation. Now, go back, a week ago, and I was having this conversation on my channel, and I said that I would be fine with the 49ers paying for a pick. That's basically what you're doing, right? You're giving up some money to get a pick, a 4th, 5th, whatever it is. But I'm not giving up $13 million.
Yeah,
I mean, I would maybe say, okay, if it's a like maybe $4 million, but even $4 million for a 4th round, 5th or 5th round pick could be a little high, considered high. So that's where if I'm going to pay part of it, that's as high as I would go. And the longer this thing goes, if they're not going to be able to move them, I start to lean more towards just going ahead and going ahead and releasing them and not doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on this topic, before we leave this one, do you guys feel like there's anywhere that Jimmy Garoppolo has any trade value? Do you feel like there's anything that they can even get for him?
Like I would say that I don't think he had as much trade value as Baker Mayfield. I think that's apparent. Like, so I don't think that they're going to get what the Browns got for Baker. And I look at it might have been the same like future style pick, like where maybe it was the 6th round and it could go up to a 5th rounder, like or something to that effect, or even a 7th rounder. But I think that's the extent of what you're going to, because I just think that the league is privy to what the 49ers have been trying to do at this point. They're just trying to recoup anything, and they know they're not stupid. Like they know that all the 49ers have to do is release him, and they free up all this cash. So they're just going to wait it out. Like there's until a quarterback actually gets hurt and a team needs somebody. Mm-hmm. This isn't even going to be a story. This isn't even a question of what how the league is looking at this.
Yep. As of right now, today, what is it, July 8th, July 7th, there's nowhere for him to go. There's nowhere for him to go. He has no trade value right now. A team like the Texans, maybe, but it makes no sense for them. You're not a contending team. If the Texans were contending and Davis Mills was their best option at quarterback, that would make sense for Garoppolo to go there. But they're not. They're a garbage franchise, have a garbage roster right now. It makes no sense to move Jimmy Garoppolo to the Texans. Why would the Texans trade for him? I would rock out with Davis Mills too. Absolutely. So there's nowhere for him to go right now. Being the way I am, if Jimmy Garoppolo was cut outright, if I'm Jimmy Garoppolo, I'd like to play for the Seahawks and try to stick it to my former team, which I think would be pretty cool. A lot of cool storylines there. But they have a garbage roster right now, too. He's not going to push the ball downfield with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. It's just everything's at a standstill. The best thing to do is cut him outright. And like you touched on, Lucas, if there is an injury that happens, I can see a team moving, but I don't think he's going to last that long throughout the preseason to be on the roster, even in a position to do that if a quarterback were to get hurt week 1, week 2.
The thing to watch here is what happens in Cleveland. If Deshaun Watson is suspended for the season, we don't know what's going to happen there. That hasn't been decided yet. If he's suspended for the season, that's when he makes sense to Cleveland because they're going to have the salary cap space. Cleveland is a team that has players that can get them to the playoffs. That is on kind of a win now. And they don't have a quarterback that's going to get them there. I know people say, Jacoby Brissett.
That's where I was going. Yeah.
Has anybody actually watched Jacoby Brissett play though? I mean, the guy's like what his best season was 7-8 or maybe 8-7.
I think I think Jacoby Brissett could be the type of backup quarterback, emphasis on backup, that actually keeps you afloat for a couple weeks if
Exactly.
need be. But if you had to choose between Jacoby Brissett and Jimmy Garoppolo on a contending roster, which I do think the Browns are, not necessarily Super Bowl contenders, but they can be competitive and make a push in January. I do think so. I would go with Garoppolo if that's the case. But even then, you have so much money tied up to your quarterbacks. You're paying Baker Mayfield, you're paying Deshaun Watson, you're paying Jacoby Brissett and Jimmy Garoppolo. But hey, if it's to be competitive, I guess you got to do it. So maybe there. I just don't think it would come via trade. I think it would be again a release, and then Jimmy Garoppolo goes to Cleveland that way.
The only way that I is if it's for the season. I agree with you that if it's only for a couple of weeks, if the suspension's for say 4 weeks or 6 weeks, you just roll with what you have. But if it's for more than that, then you have to go with Garoppolo. Now, real quick, there's a couple of questions in the comment section I want to hit on. Niner Sickness asks, correct me if I'm wrong, if we cut Jimmy Garoppolo and he gets picked up by a team, don't we get a third-round pick for him? The answer to that is no. The only way the 49ers will get a third-round pick for Jimmy Garoppolo is if they hold on to him this entire season and then he leaves in free agency after next season. Then it could become a third-round pick, but that's based off of how much money he gets as well. I don't think it's just based on him being a quarterback. It's based off of how much the contract is that he picks up. Another question up here real quick. It was a super chat that I just didn't get to, Jake, because of where we were in our conversation. But Jay, I really appreciate that. I really appreciate your donation. He says, Jack, if the team keeps Jimmy Garoppolo so he stays with the 49ers for whatever crazy reason, could he be traded if a quarterback gets hurt on another team? How much of the contract are the Niners responsible for? That will depend on when that trade happens. If it happens prior to the season, the 49ers aren't on the hook for anything. If it's by a trade, if it's week 2, then they're going to have to pay whatever his week 1 salary was and then move on. So the answer to that, Jay, is just difficult because it depends on when it occurs. If it's before the season starts, say it's in the middle of training camp, doesn't matter. I think they can move off of him as long as he's not on the final roster, the 53-man roster. He doesn't even ever hit their books anyway. But if once the season starts,
I think it was some small amount that they're on the hook for or something. At least that's what I heard earlier today, which that was the first time I had heard it. So don't quote me on it.
Sure. Yeah. So yes, they can trade him and they would just be on the hook for however long he's on the roster for if they keep him once the season starts. So thank you very much for the super chat. That was a good question that you had there. Coming off of Jimmy Garoppolo, I've had enough of talking about Jimmy Garoppolo and quarterbacks and those kind of things. This is a little bit of we're even going to skip over what Jerry Rice did today. I don't know if you guys have seen what Jerry Rice did today, but he started off last Friday saying that Trey Lance is the guy. Explained all of why he's better than Jimmy Garoppolo. Then he went on the TV station up in Nevada in Reno, said that he believes that it should be a quarterback competition. And then he went on NFL Network and again said that it's all about Trey. He's all over the board with Trey Lance. So we'll skip on that one because I said I'm tired of talking about quarterbacks a little bit. I know you guys look
for sure.
Quarterbacks sell though. Look we got 111 people watching us today. That's one of the better shows recently that we've had.
It's all Niner Nick. It's all Niner Nick.
No.
Well, it is. They like the look, and he's fired up, and he's a fiery guy. They really like him. Let's go to which one do you guys want to talk about? I'm going to ask you. Do you want to talk about the roster, Jimmy Ward, or Brandon Aiyuk and Deebo Samuel?
I'm good for whatever, and I'm good to hang on. If we have to go past 7, Jack, I'm good if need be.
Whenever.
No, we're good. We've got about 15 more minutes and to go. Which one do you guys want? You want me to pick one?
We can talk about Deebo. I think we touched on Deebo and Aiyuk earlier.
Fine. We're going to do that one because I like this one. We touched on it a little bit, but we didn't get a no, especially in this one. But do you buy or sell? Deebo Samuel, Brandon Aiyuk, best wide receiver duo in the NFL. And this comes about because of I believe it was an Instagram post from Brandon Aiyuk that Deebo Samuel liked, where they were stating that they're basically they feel like they're the best duo in the NFL. What do you guys think? Buy or sell it?
I'm gonna go ahead. I'll sell this one. Do I think they have the potential, emphasis on potential, to be one of the better or the best wide receiver duos in the NFL? Yes. Deebo Samuel is a fantastic talent. We know that. Brandon Aiyuk is another great talent, but they're not there yet. And saying that they are is a little disrespect. I have no problem with they themselves saying it. I want them to believe that they're the best duo in the NFL. There's nothing wrong with that. But as far as actually having to formulate an opinion on it, coming from a place of not being a homer. They're not. Come on. You look around, you got Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. You have Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson. Who knows how Allen Robinson is, but he's done more than Brandon Aiyuk in his career. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Mike Evans is one of the most underrated great receivers of all time. He's a fan. I think he has 1,000 yards receiving every year in the league since he's been drafted, correct?
Yeah.
And that you just go through, there's so many other wide receivers, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. So I think they have the potential to be one of the best in the NFL, but right now they're not there. They're not there. Aiyuk would have to have a monster season, and Deebo Samuel would have to have a monster season. And in this 49ers offense, like if you were to put them on the Dallas Cowboys or if you were to put them on the Green Bay Packers with Aaron Rodgers, they could put up numbers where people would be like, oh my gosh, this is the best duo in the NFL. But in this offense, they're not going to put up the flashy numbers. They have great potential. They're great players, but they're not the best tandem in the NFL right now.
Yeah, you kind of took all my guys that I had in front of him. Like it's hard to say because we're Niner fans, right? Like and I love Deebo. I think Deebo is the most dynamic weapon in the league because of all the different things that he can do and how physical he is, and that you can't really tackle him with one guy. I don't think that we've really seen everything that Brandon Aiyuk can do because of how limited the offense was in my opinion, with Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, with that being said, like you said, it's entirely possible that they become that, but right now we can't really see it because we honestly don't know what Brandon Aiyuk is. They've hinted towards it. We know that there's potential there, but I think that it's going to get skewed even more, like I talked about earlier, because they've got a Juwan Jennings, and they've got George Kittle, and they've got I think Ray McLeod is going to have a big role on this team. So I just think that, and then I haven't even mentioned Danny Gray. We don't know what we're going to get out of that, but he looks spectacular from the videos that I've seen. So it's going to be really difficult to sit there and say these two guys on this offense are the most dynamic duo in the league, when I think that the 49ers are going to be spreading the ball around all over, like with a bunch of different guys. And the way that Kyle schemes everything around and gets certain guys open on certain plays, if Trey is what's advertised, I think that it's going to be, we may be talking about the 49ers have the best wide receiver room in the league. I don't know about the wide receiver duo.
And I have one more thing just to interject real quick, Jack. I see Mike Thomas left a comment, both get 1,000 yards this year. I think that's actually relatively realistic. I wouldn't be surprised if both Deebo Samuel and Brandon Aiyuk achieve over 1,000 yards. But even if they accomplish that, they're still, to me, not the best duo quite yet, because there's other duos that be doing it like clockwork year in after year out. Mike Williams, Keenan Allen both achieved it this past year, as did Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. Yeah. So there's a lot of other tandems that are already achieving that. And again, Samuel and Aiyuk are both more than capable of it. Deebo's already achieved it. Aiyuk definitely looks like he can achieve it. Just the way that the 49ers offense is formulated, they're not going to put up as flashy of numbers. So I saw someone top 10. I think they're top 10. They're great talents. 10. I don't think there's, but number one, no.
Yeah, I don't think they're the top duo. I'm going to say this real quick. I do believe that Deebo Samuel was the best. I've said this a few times. I think the Deebo Samuel is the best wide receiver the 49ers have had since Jerry Rice. So I think he's on pace to be that. I think that Brandon Aiyuk has shown the ability to get open and not get the ball. I think if you go back to like the NFC Championship game, let's say we're playing that game in 2022 with Trey Lance at quarterback, I think Brandon Aiyuk has a big day down in LA against the Rams. If you go back and you watch the film of that game, Brandon Aiyuk's wide open running down the field a number of times with nobody around him, and the ball goes over to other people. So they're not there right now, but they have the potential to get close to it, if not the best, or you have the potential to be really good. So we'll see how that plays off for him. But Deebo Samuel to me is a stud. So
Jack, I got to ask you now, you're going Deebo over Terrell Owens, greatest wide receiver since Jerry Rice?
If you look at the numbers for Terrell Owens and Deebo Samuel through the first 3 years as members of the 49ers, Samuel has better numbers as a receiver, and that's with the injuries that he had in year 2. Go back. If you look at Deebo Samuel, here's what I'll say. Deebo Samuel's rookie season, second only to Jerry Rice in terms of receivers in 49ers history. This last season, 1,400 yards, and that's having to play halfback for most of the second half of the season. He was on pace to have almost 1,800, 1,900 yards this year, which would have been second to Jerry Rice again. So he has the ability, or had the ability, to put up monster numbers as a receiver. He just got the targets taken away from him. I've heard people talk about, his lack of touchdowns. I think his lack of touchdowns is in part to the 49ers scheme. If you compare him to Cooper Kupp, for example, you can take Brandon Aiyuk, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Juwan Jennings. I know for sure those four. You add them all together, and they had 37 targets in the red zone last year. Cooper Kupp had 36. And so that's the difference in the offenses. And of course,
that's a stat. That's a stat for you.
To play devil's advocate here, I'm just going to throw this out here so Jerry Rice only played in 2 games in 1997, which means 2 out of the 3 years that both Terrell Owens and Jerry Rice were on the team, Owens was second fiddle. And you can make the argument that since he's been drafted, Deebo Samuel's been the number 1 target for the 49ers, and you can't say the same for Terrell Owens the first 3 years. So that's just another perspective. I think it's actually pretty close as far as Terrell Owens and Deebo Samuel, who's the second best receiver in 49ers history. But you got to give it to Owens, in my opinion, just because the longevity behind it, and he's a Hall of Famer. Deebo Samuel's coming off one fantastic, phenomenal season. We'll see if he can keep stockpiling them like Terrell Owens did. But that's why I go with T.O. right now over Samuel.
I agree with you that Owens was second fiddle to Rice. He still had more targets, though, than what Deebo Samuel has so far.
Yeah, and I would say that Terrell and Deebo has been guilty of this too, but Terrell had the dropsies especially in the beginning. So it was but T.O. is one of my favorite players all time. I would say if he was in this type of offense, as far as we're talking about Yak, this guy. T.O. I would put him above. If we're just talking pure stats, I get what you're saying, but T.O. I just think it was an unstoppable force. But like you said, Nick, it was really hard for him to assert himself in the beginning because he had the GOAT in front of him, and but as soon as Jerry left, he really took the reins, and he became an unstoppable weapon the minute he got out from under Jerry's shadow. So
this is one of those things where you remember when Jim Harbaugh was here, he talked about when you compare people, you're tearing one down for the other. And so that kind of happens with this argument a little bit, because I agree with you. I love Terrell Owens. When Owens was with the 49ers, let's just say that there were some conversations that you got to get the ball to that guy. We can talk to you guys about that off the air as to who those conversations were with. But the interesting part about it is, you're right. He when you look at Owens, I think he was great with the 49ers. So much of his Pro Bowl resume came from his time in other places with the Eagles and the Cowboys too. So when you look at Owens, you've got to just focus on just what he did with the 49ers. He got better as time went on, and when Jeff Garcia became his quarterback, his numbers exploded for a couple seasons there. So who knows? I mean, it's a fun argument to have, right? Yeah. It's good that you're able to even argue one of your receivers up against a guy that's in the Hall of Fame. So real quick, 49ers Throwback asks, thank you for the donation. We're going to change gears a little bit here. He says, thank you for the show content. What position are you looking forward to watching in training camp? Do you think Jordan Mason makes the roster?
Please, yes.
I'm looking forward to. There's so many different competitions, and you look at the roster. It's going to be hard to really focus in on one. Offensive line is going to be a battle. Defensive line. So as far as position group, that's tough to really zero in on one. I think it's going to be yes, like Peter said, yes, because I think there's going to be competition everywhere on this to make the 53-man. Do I think Jordan Mason makes the roster? Well, on my 53-man roster projection that I put out yesterday, I had him not making the roster. I had that last spot going to Jeff Wilson Jr. Big part of that is that Jeff Wilson Jr. is extremely versatile. He can play fullback and halfback. He also plays on special teams. And the only way that Jordan Mason, I think, makes it is if he shows that ability to play special teams, and it might have to result in Trey Sermon not being on the roster. What do you guys think?
Yeah,
go for it, Knight.
No, I was just gonna say, Trey Sermon has to make the roster. They're not gonna cut him a year removed from taking him in the third round. He has to be on the team. Like, regardless of how brutal it may be to watch, sometimes I still think you have to give him the benefit of the doubt. That's like Joe Williams territory. If you cut a third round running back in year 2, that'd be. And even seen Trey, it almost would be worse because you know that you had to cut Joe Williams because he doesn't have I don't even think he got picked up by anybody. But to cut Trey Sermon, who at least showed you that he was, for other reasons, that he just wasn't a good pick, he's got to be around. I think he's going to make the team. Obviously, Elijah Mitchell's going to be on here. Ty Davis Price is going to be on here. So that 4th spot does boil down to Jeff Wilson Jr. and Jordan Mason. I don't know enough about Jordan Mason yet. I'm always been high on Jeff Wilson. He does get hurt quite a bit. But I'm with you, Jack. He might be able to make the team if he can show in preseason that he can catch the ball out of the backfield, if he's reliable in pass protection. If he checks off a lot of those boxes and can prove he's as versatile as Jeff Wilson Jr., maybe we do see him nabbing that last spot over him. The only person I think is clearly gone right now is JaMychal Hasty in that running back room.
I agree.
Yeah, and that I was just about to say that, like, that JaMychal Hasty is, I think that he's the first one that's gone in my mind. I just don't think he has real value at this point. But I think that they have a chance to maybe trade Trey Sermon for something. I don't know what they would get for him, but I don't think that they would outright release him. But I think the opportunity could be there for them to get a trade going for him, just because he is a high pick and somebody might want. If somebody gets hurt in training camp, like always happens, somebody might give them something for him, because I have heard nothing but good things about Jordan Mason, and and it is. They said that he's actually looked better, and Jack, maybe tell me if I'm wrong, but he says I've heard that he looks better than Ty Davis Price so far, and that he actually catches the ball better and he blocks better. Now I don't know how much of that is true, considering they aren't in real training camp yet. But they said that he's looked really good, and I think that one thing Kyle has shown us is that he doesn't care when you're drafted.
Sure. I would have to ask you who said that, and here's why.
Okay.
Because we haven't seen Ty Davis Price pass protect. We haven't seen him run the ball with linemen around him.
That's because true. I think it was just the way that they saw him run. But I just heard a lot of it on Twitter. Like, people were saying, I remember hearing Grant mention him a couple of times, and and then I heard another guy that was at the I want to say it was Mayoko, but I might be wrong on that, so don't quote me. But I remember hearing Grant mention Jordan Mason and how good he was looking in one of the practices, and but they were saying that he looked better than Ty Davis Price. Now we know a lot of things Grant says are kind of tongue in cheek, but
all I'm going to say is that I was high on Jordan Mason and what I saw. I thought that I myself in my report said that he reminded last year during training camp, the guy that stood out to me as a running back was Elijah Mitchell. From day one, there was just something about the way that he ran the ball that he looked really good. For me, that guy this year is Jordan Mason. He looks like he has the explosiveness. You see him catch the ball in the backfield and be able to beat linebackers around the corner and all those kind of things. So yes, Jordan Mason looked really good. I can't compare him to Ty Davis Price because we've only seen him in one practice, and in that one practice they were, when it came to offensive time, all they were doing was 7-on-7, and this is a bruising running back who they're throwing the ball to, and that's not really his gig. So we're not going to know about Ty Davis Price until we get into training camp and really probably even into the preseason games, and he's got to get
talking about his ability not to catch the ball out of the backfield. That was funny because I was on the plane coming home from a trip in May, I want to say, and it was right during the rookie mini camp. And I didn't even know it. I saw a quote, and the quote didn't show who said it, but I knew instantly who it was just by reading it. And it was Grant, but I didn't see Grant's name attached to it. It was just the quote itself saying, that after a play, Ty Davis Price, I believe it was Ty Davis Price. It was another player. This definitely happened. Grant has it in one of his stories. Just after the play, casually tossed the ball up in the air to catch it, and he dropped it. He just threw a ball. Oh, here we go. Play's over. And just dropped it. And I thought it was the funniest quote I read this offseason. But it just what you're bringing up right now, Lucas, about, and you too, Jack, how Jordan Mason's flashing. I guess that's something that everyone could agree on. Like, he's flashing. This is a noticeable running back at the NFL level. And it just brings back the question. I instantly had a problem with the Ty Davis Price pick because you've proven time and time again you find talent at the running back position like no other NFL organization. So that's beating a dead horse, but it's just like now we're hearing this another name, surprise, surprise, of an undrafted free agent running back that's turning heads at practice.
So we'll see in training camp like what he actually looks like in pads but I think the blocking comment they were making was based off of his college film, and that they said he was a good blocker in college or something to that effect. So
and that's fine. I haven't. In all honesty, I haven't watched any of his college films. All I know of Jordan Mason is what I saw of him on the field with the 49ers. I've seen highlight clips from Georgia Tech. I've watched more of Ty Davis Price because he was a draft pick. But
for sure,
I'm not willing to say one's better than the other at this point. But I really like what I've seen out of Jordan Mason. Really quick before we wrap it up, because we've been a little over an hour. But Niner by Nature asked Jack, if Jimmy competes in camp, gets hurt, does that guarantee his contract? And the answer to that is yes. If he's out there and he gets hurt, then the Niners are going to be eating all of it. So that's another piece of this whole, competition thing that Jerry Rice was talking about. And I was talking to Nick, you and I, if you remember when I had you on my show, and you and I were talking at one point about should the Niners have a quarterback competition between Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance, and I was like, yeah, sure, let him compete, let the best man win, and then I've kind of backed off of that as time's gone on to an extent. I understand people who say let him compete and let the best guy win.
Yeah,
it
doesn't make sense right now. This specific scenario.
Yeah, and like somebody said I don't know who it was. Somebody said this on Twitter, and it was in regards to Jerry Rice's comments of just let him compete. They said, well, he's tired of answering the question. Well, how do you think the whole 49ers roster feels about Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance questions? Yeah. I'm sure all those guys are tired of hearing about it. And, it goes to what Colin Cowherd and Mike Silver said today. If you can't be the guy if the guy is still in the room with you, right? Because Jimmy Garoppolo's always been the guy in the locker room. So
that's the one quote that was the first thing I written down, because that's what Colin Cowherd opened up with. He said, you can't be the guy if the other guy is still in the room 2 locker rooms down from you, basically. And I disagree with that statement. And I heard a very compelling argument on the radio the other day. And this is exactly what I believe, that if Trey Lance is the player that you believe he is, and the reason why you took him 3rd overall, he has to have the mental makeup not to let Jimmy Garoppolo being in the locker room affect him. And I actually subscribe to that statement. I agree. You aren't the player that we hope you can be if seeing Jimmy Garoppolo in the locker room freaks you out and then you go on the field and don't perform. I think that's very fair to say, that you need to be mentally tough enough to have someone looking over. You have to be looking over your shoulder and still perform, knowing that there's this guy behind me that has had success. I need to go out there and put forth my best effort time in and time out, and I'm not going to let it get to my head. I think that there's a lot of truth behind that. And I think you can be the guy. You can be the guy by having the other guy in the locker room, by establishing yourself as the guy. And the way you do that is you win your teammates over and your coaches over by being the better quarterback each day in practice. So I didn't like that statement by Cowherd, because I believe you can become the guy even if the other guy who previously had success and is liked by his teammates still in the room. And I want Trey Lance to be the quarterback that doesn't get worried or freaked out that another quarterback's in the room with him. This organization believes in you. Just go out there and show it. That's all you got to do. Don't let the noise get to your head. So that's where I'm coming from, as far as I don't want Trey Lance to quiver a little bit because he sees Garoppolo still on the roster. If that is the case, I don't think he should be, but looking at it through a different lens, you can't get shaken up a little bit by having him in the room.
I agree with you. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah. I just don't think that Trey Lance is shaken at all by any of it. Like from what I've seen of him in press conferences and when they ask him those questions, I think the Niners are really assuring him that he is the guy. And I think that he probably thought that he should have beat out Jimmy last offseason. But I think he kind of understood the plan. And I think we're at a point now to where I think he understands this is his team. I think he would welcome a competition at this point. And from the vibe that I get from him and the vibe that I get from Kyle Shanahan in their interviews is that they're very comfortable. This is I've said this on my show a couple of times, is that I look at Kyle Shanahan compared to last year. Last year, he just seemed mad at the world all the time. And now this offseason, he has been smiling and joking and just calm and just cool and collected. And I think it's just a completely different vibe that I get about Trey. I don't even think that it would be a competition, in my opinion.
Well, the thing is, if you're going to have that competition and you're going to do that, Lance has to go out and he's got to blow it out of the park so that there's no doubt.
True.
Right? Because he's got to get guys like Eric Armstead, who is still talking about how much he likes Jimmy Garoppolo, onto his side. And there's other guys that are in that locker room, I'm sure, that kind of share that same opinion. So if they're going to go that direction, it's got to be a no doubter. I think that's what the 49ers, how they went into last year, was, hey, we're going to roll with Jimmy, but if Trey knocks it out of the park, we'll go Trey. John Lynch said as much in a way, how during, I think it was about 1 week into, like after week 1 of the preseason last year, when he mentioned, or maybe before week 1 of the preseason, he had mentioned how Lance was pushing Garoppolo, but things kind of fell flat after that. And I think he had an opportunity against the Chargers, didn't take advantage of it. And so we saw how it played out. That's it. Real quick though, we're going to wrap up the show now. Before I do that, I want to throw out this super chat from Jay. He's $2 donation. I really appreciate it. He says, Jack, great show. And I really like the 2 young men. So I guess I'm the old guy of the group. And so,
I'm probably older than you. I'm probably older than you, Jack.
I agree with you, Jay. I really, it was great to have, I've been doing this and trying to get, there's call-in shows and different things. I went this route instead of doing call-in shows because this gives us a chance to really have a conversation. So I've been doing this as the 3rd one that I've done now. And I really appreciate Peter and Nick for making the time to come over and do this and, give them a platform to come up here and let everybody know what their thoughts are. And it's been a lot of fun. And I really appreciate what both of you guys are doing.
I appreciate you having me on, Jack. And it was really a blessing. And when you asked me to come on, I was really happy to come on. It was great seeing everybody in the chat. Great actually meeting Niner Nick. I'd seen him many times on Twitter, but first time meeting him and first time actually talking to you, Jack. So I had a great time. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, Jack, thanks for the invite. Pleasure coming on as always. Lucas, nice to get to know you face to face for the first time. It was fun discussion. It was a fun discussion for sure.
Absolutely. And if you guys ever want to do a show together, let me know. Before we leave, just want to say thanks to these guys, like I already said, but thanks to everybody in the comment section that you guys have been a lively group over in the site. I can see some arguments going on. Brian's in an argument. I think it's Brian that's in an argument with somebody because of his take on Trey Sermon. Great stuff, guys. I appreciate it. Before you guys leave, though, can you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you're not already there. Get yourself over to Niner Nick. You still doing your deal on YouTube and everything? You still got stuff for people to follow?
I'm inactive right now, but I'm ready to get it going for training camp, and I'll be back in action. I got about 2 more weeks taking it easy before the pods start coming out, the YouTube shows, all the above.
Awesome. And I know that Peter has one as well. So if you guys can do me a favor after you hit like and subscribe to my channel, get over to their channels on YouTube and like them as well, and give them a subscription because they're doing great work and they deserve the love. So show it to them.
Right on.
Appreciate you.
Thank you guys all very much. And I will be back. I'm not sure if I'll be doing a show tomorrow. If not, I will definitely be back on Monday with Rob Shue for the Hammerhead show. Until then, have a great one, everybody. Have a great rest of your Thursday and take care and have a good one.
Go Niners.